Yo, what's up Plus Ultra fam? It's me, Plus Ultraman, and today we're for our first non-Dragon Ball What If. I'm sure y'all extremely confused on the concept for this one, so without further ado, let's jump right in. Light spoilers for Season 2 and 3 in this video. So I, like a lot of people, view Stain as the most interesting villain to come out of My Hero Academia at this point. All for One is definitely close behind, but Stain's impact on the series is definitely greater than his at this point. Stain not only inspired a new generation of villains, but he's also inspired a bunch of the heroes that we now have, like Ida. His impact on the series was so great, and I kinda hate to see him go. So I thought, what if we have a timeline in which he's a much more prominent figure from the start of the story? And that thought led us to this new scenario. So let's jump into this timeline. Now this timeline stays the exact same from Deku's childhood all the way to middle school. The day of the sludge villain attack, however, is where we see the major changes in the storyline. You see, after her flashy takedown of the giant villain, Mount Lady would be on the radar of the fanatical hero killer Stain. Remember, in her first appearance, she was not very heroic. She's actually a great introduction to the money and fame-hungry heroes that the society of My Hero Academia has created. So needless to say, Stain has deemed her worthy of death and is making his way to Deku's hometown. Other than that, the timeline remains basically the same. Deku gets bullied by Bakugo, walks home from school, gets attacked by the sludge villain, gets saved by All Might, follows All Might, they have their conversation, and the sludge villain escapes and attacks Bakugo. Though the next change came during Deku's attempt to save Bakugo. When none of the pros were willing to, this small, weak, and quirkless boy ran headlong to danger to save his friend. And one person who was not in attendance in the original timeline would have taken notice and truly appreciated this action from Deku. And of course, that person was Stain. Now of course, All Might does step in to save both Deku and Bakugo, and even acknowledges Deku at this moment as worthy of one for all. Deku even receives that Bakugo-style thank you on his way home, but before anything else could happen, he'd feel a bit of pain and find himself unable to move, before being mysteriously carried away by a figure. And right after they were gone, All Might would pop out, trying to find the boy. While paralyzed not only by Stain's quirk, but also fear, Deku could tell that he's being carried across rooftops at an incredibly fast pace. Though, after a few minutes, he would find himself able to move, and he'd be set down as soon as he was. He would then see who his assailant was, and realize that he had no idea who this was. Now, Deku doesn't realize who Stain is at this point in time, because he hasn't been operating very long. In the original series, at the time of crippling Tensei Ida, Stain had only killed 17 pro heroes. His name was also not extremely well known. He was really and truly just starting to get himself known at this point in time. This, coupled with the fact that Stain doesn't usually kill one hero in a city and leave, leads me to believe that he had not been operating very long in the original timeline. You also have to remember that Deku's training actually took 10 months, and the attack on the USJ was maybe a few or maybe 1 month after that. So, in this timeline, I'm going to say that Stain has not yet committed any murders. Before Deku could say anything, however, Stain would cut him off and begin heavily praising the boy for his heroism, and the fact that he was able to step in and save Bakugo while all the pro heroes around him were too scared to do anything. This is Stain though, so he'd probably liken the boy to All Might and say it in a very creepy yet fanatical way. Regardless though, I think Deku would have a very positive response to all this praise. He's needed to be called a hero for a very long time. Whether that came from his mother, All Might, or Stain, I think he would have reacted pretty positively to it. Deku would have loosened up a bit from the praise, but he'd still be pretty wary of Stain as number one, the guy is armed to the teeth, and number two, he's pretty sure that he'd harmed him to get him here, as his arm is currently bleeding. Not to mention, Deku's a huge hero fanboy, so he would definitely recognize this hero, if it was a hero, if he knew of them. Stain on the other hand was still very excited and praising Deku, but he'd finally ask the question of, why didn't Deku use his quirk when trying to save Bakugo? To which he'd be surprised and excited to learn Deku did not even have a quirk. This would really interest Stain. This kid was so heroic, even without a quirk. He put himself in so much danger, yet there was no way for him to defend himself. It was so selfless. And at this time, Stain would get a very interesting idea. What if he was able to mold this boy into someone like him? Someone like All Might. Somebody who could help him change and better the society around them. Remember, no villain is really a villain. Everyone's the hero of their own story. So Stain really and truly does believe what he's about to do in this instance is right. He would also realize that he can't just kill the bad heroes, but he also has to create more good heroes like All Might. So he would extremely bluntly ask the boy, do you want to become a hero? Now Deku is still shocked, but he would have no hesitation answering this question yes. But All Might had just told him that it was impossible to be a hero without a quirk. But at the same time, I don't see Deku completely giving up on his dream. At the very least, I see Deku becoming a police officer if he never got one for all. But it's truly in his heart to help people, and I don't think he would give up on that just because he doesn't have a quirk. Here, Stain would finally offer to train Deku, and I really think he would accept. The guy is pretty desperate at this point in time, and I think had anybody offered to train him at this point, he would have probably accepted it. It doesn't have to just be All Might. Before Deku could even consider anything else, Stain would begin giving him instructions on where to meet tomorrow for training, before bolting off the roofs and leaving Deku alone to find his own way down. And so began the next 10 months of hell for Deku. Once home though, Deku would try and do some type of research about Stain, trying to find some type of information about him. But again, I don't think he'd find much. Stain hasn't been operating very long, and at most, I think he'd find something by Chizuru Akugure, which is Stain's real name. Maybe some type of paper or video about how Stain thought that their hero society was going down the drain. Training would still begin tomorrow though. And Stain's training would be similar to All Might's, and that is still meant to get Deku's body acclimated to be more athletic, but it'd be a lot more brutal. Remember, Stain's quirk, Blood Curdle, only affects his ability to ingest a person's blood and paralyze them for a set amount of time. Meaning, all his physical feats that we saw in the fight against Deku, Todoroki, and Ida were all of his own physical training. Which also means that any of the training he did must have been completely insane. Not to mention, Stain is completely obsessive and fanatical. So it goes without mentioning that he probably pushed himself to the breaking point way too many times. And I'm sure he would encourage Deku to do the same here. And Deku would be all for this training. It would be hard on him, but he'd be under the impression that he has to work harder than anybody else around him. Remember, while even training with All Might, he overtrained a bit. And yes, overtraining is a real phenomenon. But with Stain, he would only encourage this, telling Deku to always be training. Though another very interesting part of Stain's training would be his influence on Deku's tactical reasoning. Again, Deku is pretty obsessive and a fanboy, and Stain is even more so he would love seeing Deku write down his notes about heroes. And again, he'd probably encourage him to always think so tactically, but he'd also have him do it quicker. In the fight against Todoroki, Stain shows that he is actually a pretty good tactician. He just gets too narrow-minded and starts to lose focus on detail. So I think he'd have a very quick realization that Deku was a way better tactician than he, and if he could only get his speed at which he could analyze his opponents up, he'd be very dangerous, even without a quirk. So Stain would have them pour over notes day and night, as well as force Deku to also study for school and for the UA entrance exam. Another aspect of Stain's training would be combat. Stain is an amazing combatant, and I'm sure he'd want his student to be one as well. So I see him implementing daily spars into Deku's training. The only reason All Might didn't implement combat into Deku's training was because the Aim to Pass American Dream Plan was really only meant to develop Deku's body to use one for all. Everything else was secondary. I'm sure you're all wondering, what is All Might doing during all this? And he's still looking for a successor, but at the same time, I think his mind would be kind of hooked up on Deku. Deku showed a lot of promise in trying to save Bakugo without a quirk, and I think All Might would have saw a lot of himself in Deku. At the same time, I don't think All Might can really do much to find Deku. The most I can see him doing is going to Tsukuichi and giving him a description to help him find him, or maybe going to the local middle school and asking about Deku. Both of which seem kind of creepy, so I won't be having him do that. For the moment, I think All Might would just do a bit of hero work and wait for the UA entrance exams. At the very least, he might run into Deku again, or he might even see Deku at the exam. And at the very least, I'm sure Togata would be a pretty good candidate for receiving One for All, as he has a great head on his shoulders, and if he was not a student, he would be considered the number 2 hero in the world. I don't see All Might seeing many people worthy of One for All. Bakugo, when he first met him, definitely wasn't, as the kid was too brash and arrogant, so he would definitely hold on to it until the UA entrance exams. Now, Stain is just teaching simple hand-to-hand combat, how to punch, how to kick, and how to block. There's no official statement on Stain's hand-to-hand combat ability, and we never really get to see him fight with his hands in the series, but I would imagine it's not far below average, at least. And at the very least, Stain can at least teach Deku how to street fight. This is important because Deku's hand-to-hand combat in the original timeline isn't great. He relies on those over-the-shoulder throws a lot, and when he does use One for All, his admiration for All Might locks him into using big smashes. He makes a huge leap in progress when discovering shoot style, but even then, it would be nothing but beneficial for him to learn how to fight a little bit better than he did in the original timeline. Now, let me put your minds at rest and say Deku will not be learning how to use a sword. The only reason Stain uses a sword is to draw blood for his quirk and to kill people, neither of which Deku will be doing. Now, Stain does teach Deku one more thing, but as of right now, I won't be revealing it because there's no real way for him to apply it in the UA entrance exams. It will come into play later, and I think you guys will be very surprised when I reveal it. The final aspect of Stain's training would be Indoctrination. He would be constantly trying to get Deku to agree with him on his ideology, but it would backfire as Deku would constantly counter him on it. See, what we commonly refer to as Talk no Jutsu from Naruto is kind of a shonen trope. The protagonist must always wrestle with and at some point conquer the ideology of the antagonist. We see this trope implemented in other shonen. We saw it in the Yusuke vs. Toguro fight, we've just recently seen it in the Asta vs. Veto fight, and we've even seen it in My Hero Academia, when Deku has to convince Todoroki that the fire part of his quirk is not something of his father's, but of himself. The protagonist must not only defeat his antagonist physically, but also ideologically. Only then is the battle truly won. So, that being said, it's not too rare for a shonen protagonist to have a talk no jutsu of some sorts, and Deku is shown to have it. Stain would slowly begin to become confused. Every time he would bring up this idea that he must purge out fake heroes to create a stronger society based off All Might's ideals, Deku counters him with this idea that that's not what All Might would do. Therefore, Stain can't create a society based off All Might's ideals because he himself is not acting like All Might. Remember, we've determined that Stain at this point has not killed any pro-hero. He's also solely focused on Deku's training, so he's had no chances to do so. And with this total shell shock, I'm sure he'd be kind of wary of doing so now. But he would lock those feelings down to make sure his student was prepared for the UA entrance exams. Now, at the end of their 10 months of training, Deku would have changed by leaps and bounds. He's not going to be some badass that's not afraid of anything, but I imagine his sparring with Stain would have given him a bit more confidence. He'd also have a bit thicker skin because he'd be constantly arguing with Stain over his ideals. The biggest change to Deku would have come physically. His training with Stain would have been a bit more beneficial than his training with All Might. He's nowhere near Stain's level of physicality, but he'll be a lot more athletic than he was in the original timeline. You have to keep in mind that Stain had way more time to train, and he's also a grown man, so his abilities will be a lot stronger than Deku's. As for Stain, he's wrestling with his ideals at the moment, as Deku has changed them a bit. He hasn't completely abandoned them, but he's definitely put some more thought into them than he recently did. For now though, he will focus completely on Deku and his development. With that, we move on to the UA entrance exams. And here, everything pretty much matches back up to the timeline. Everything up until the actual physical exam, that is. See, because of Stain's training, I think Deku would have reacted to the danger a bit better than he did in the original timeline. And I could even see him getting some villain points by picking up one of the broken pieces of the robots and using it as a weapon like he did in the UA Sports Festival. Only a few though, because most of the ones around him were getting destroyed by people with stronger quirks. The biggest change comes in when the zero-pointer robot is activated. Here, Deku still notices that Uraraka is trapped and would run over to help her, but all he can really do is help lift the debris off her, maybe using the weapon he was using for one of the broken robots as a lever and getting her out. Here, he would still get rescue points, and I think Uraraka would have still had enough villain points to pass. Time was running out anyway, so the only major change here is that the zero-pointer robot will not be destroyed. And I think Deku would still definitely pass because not only does he have some villain points in this situation, but he also still gets rescue points. The way I see it, if Invisible Girl can pass, then Deku can pass. 1 week after the exams, Deku will be extremely distraught. He's still waiting on the results of his tests and is stressing over them a lot. Not to mention, Stain is nowhere to be found as he's done with some personal problems. So, it goes without saying that Deku would be extremely surprised when he'd walk outside one day to find All Might sitting outside of his apartments. All Might would then welcome Deku to the Hero Academia and offer to pass on his quirk. And here, Plus Ultra fam, is where we'll be leaving this storyline for now. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you really enjoyed this video because I really enjoyed making it. Also, big thank you to a very special friend who actually looked over my script and tried to poke as many plot holes as he could in it, as this one is really far out there. Hope you guys enjoyed, and remember, always go beyond Plus Ultra. We'll see you next time. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more, and thanks for watching.